Okay, we are live. Infinite Plane Saturday, April 26th, 2025. I was just checking out this video I want to start off talking about. For like the last few weeks, well, ever since Kate Perry went into space, we've been talking about something we describe here as truther bait. And these are intentional red herrings thrown out there to distract the people who don't believe the mainstream story. And with the Kate Perry launch, we saw a number of things. A case in point would be the dummy hand that was shown sticking out of the rocket. And a lot of people said, hey, this is obviously fake. But later, it turned out that that particular image was from a 2017 launch. So how is this 8-year-old photo getting mixed in with the real time and then being spread by these big channels? It gets mixed in with the most recent launch and makes all the conspiracy theorists look crazy. So there's a couple of points this brings up. One, there are intentional efforts to make you look crazy if you go against the mainstream. And this means that there's an active, what you'd call an active measure done to make you look crazy. There's a need to do so, which means that they are consciously hiding something. If they weren't lying, if they weren't faking stuff, they wouldn't have to do this. They wouldn't have to discredit the conspiracy theorists if there wasn't a conspiracy. Like, I think it's pretty simple, and this is standard. And there's a cure for this whole problem here of truther bait and people taking it and then running with it. And a lot of big channels, big celebrities ran with a lot of the bad evidence of fakery with the Kate Perry launch. And they didn't hone in on the good stuff, the stuff that actually makes the case. But I think it's intentional. And the only cure is to hesitate a day or two before assembling the memes that make your case. You have to suspend judgment. That's the heart and soul of skepticism. It's just waiting. Like, I don't believe headlines. I'd have to read the story first. But you have to read the headline, the story, and then the citation, see the sources, and then compare it with other information. So there's a great deal of difference between the auto believer and the media skeptic. I fall into the category of a skeptic. And we also have a broader range of experience in media criticism and a greater awareness of fakery. Most people don't even know that there is this thing called the PSYOP entertainment complex. They still think it's the military-industrial complex that they have to worry about. No, it's all mind war. And the extent of the fakery is understated. It's dismissed. I think it's overlooked. To the detriment of the truthers who've been turned into alt-woke, triggerable, programmable, just as NPC as the mainstreamers. They've been turned into a captive audience of alt propaganda. So they're smart enough to see through the mainstream, and they're like, no thanks. But somehow they don't apply any skepticism to what's on their side. And a lot of the people fall victim to truth bait, or rather, I think clickbait, trutherism, where the people on Twitter with these anonymous accounts, faceless accounts are huge right now. Faceless accounts that promulgate stuff that we've already debunked. Like, you can't get rid of this bad information because it's just going to get more clicks. And I'm consistently calling out the chemtrail people just because there's a huge audience for it. And I even thought about starting my own pro chemtrail channel just to cash in on that money, because it's a business for a lot of these people. But it would be a mistake to look at the alternative media as any different than the mainstream, because their operating assumptions are wrong in the same way. These are non-skeptical. Of course, they're not aware of this because they're 100% skeptical of the other side, but never their own. Nothing new here. But I was watching a video by Calcified Lies on YouTube called Blue Origin, Psychedelics, Controlled Opposition, and the Conspiracy Counterculture. I'm about 5 minutes in. And listen to this headline. Now conspiracy theorists claim to spot a fake hand on the Blue Origin ship as they continue to insist something was wrong with the flight. So we can see here how this misleading clue of or proof of conspiracy was planted. And I spread it because it was from a big channel. And I thought, there's no way this person constructed this meme with some old clip. But I didn't really promote it. I mean, I had it out there, but I thought, this could be a setup. I said the same thing with the door. I said it's quite likely that the door opening from the inside is completely possible, and maybe they had to check them and check their pulses and let them fix their hair before they symbolically open up the door with the tool. And it later came out that you don't even need a tool to open the capsule's door. It was all performative. None of this makes it real, and none of it makes Jeranism any less of a pervert for claiming to have seen the curve in that launch. In my opinion, they didn't go up to the stratosphere. They didn't go up to the Kármán line. They didn't go 50 miles up. At best, they were faking space in a studio, and then they are later brought out where they go inside the thing and they pretend. Like, I don't think it was real. I think it was a movie. I don't think that's controversial. Because if any part of it's fake, it's all fake. I don't think they would risk their lives, especially that group of female feminist icons. Kate Perry about to go on tour. You think they're going to let her get killed? Or think about Captain Kirk. William Shatner was like, what, 80-something years old? I don't know about the G-forces, but it would look very bad as far as the optics to kill a celebrity in one of your rockets. And I don't think they would take that risk. But I think it's all fake. I think that's the most likely explanation. I mean, nothing new as far as that goes. But the interesting thing about this launch was how many people were calling it fake, even big channels, but they forgot about it. Like, that was last week's news. It was a big deal. Now it's not, because they don't follow it through. They look at it in isolation, but nothing is in isolation. It's the forest of fakery. Like, oh, look at this fake tree. And they keep walking and they forget about it. It's like, no, every tree is fake. You're missing the pattern here. And they're not analyzing the context. Because if Bezos' rocket is fake, then what does it mean? Who does it implicate? Can you actually be a reasonable and thinking person and imagine that that's fake, but SpaceX is real somehow? And that's where I'm noticing it's either cognitive dissonance or they're just not thinking it through. Like, if Musk fakes anything, then it calls into question everything from NASA because they're so intertwined. Some people are still in the camp of, well, maybe they faked the moon landing to trick the Russians, not thinking that the space programs are all sharing the same special effects department. That should tell you something. That's why I think it's useless to talk about governments, plural. I'm pretty sure there's only one, just one big G. I mean, if you know any different, if you can prove it, feel free to dispute this. But if you look at the programming, the worldview warfare, top down, we already exist within a one world religious paradigm. It's decorated like something other than a religion, but that is what it is. And I do think it's noteworthy, again, that Klaus Schwab steps down the same day the Pope dies, each of them 88. I think there's some significance to this having to do with their symbolic roles. Because I would look at Klaus Schwab as something of symbolically representing the same thing that the Pope would represent. And this all ties into the idea that I think this world's ultimately under the control of a singular entity. And it's a new monotheism. And it's monolithically controlled mass media mind control. And that's not a conspiracy theory. Mind control is a fact of life. And I think that mass media has supplanted religion in this, and it's perfected. It's a perfect system. It really is. I mean, people get mad. They say, why do you call them elite? It's like, well, they control your mind. I mean, we've only recently come to certain insights that have given us the ability to even see the model, to separate the map from the territory. But these are recent advances, and it didn't come from Trutherville. Mainstream conspiracy theorists are sticking their whole head into the screen. They go into the simulation, and nothing is real to them because the news is fake. And I understand that flaw that in their reasoning. They think the news is reality. The news is fake, so reality is fake. They lose their minds. And I think that objectivism makes a lot more sense. In other words, recognizing that this is just a model. If it's fake, it has no bearing on what's out here. But I think the design here, as far as the media ecosystem, is to create the appearance of insanity so you can dismiss the fringes, whether woke or alt woke. And it's also interesting, too, how this Kate Perry launch really centers around the claims that critics of it are sexist. And then I'm seeing this pattern. There was that guy, Sam Smith, some performer. He came out with devil horns. And the conservatives and the right were pretty scared and mad about him for some time because of Satanism. And Kate Perry's getting sort of the same treatment at the moment, where now her performances are being hyper-analyzed by the right-wing types. And I think it goes back because she's tied in somehow, probably with Hillary Clinton or something, or she wrote a song for Kamala Harris. So it's all politicized. And my point is, the rocket launch was fake to the right, and they cite DEI, like, for not believing in it. And the left, it's real, and it's sexist to call it fake. And I noticed this pattern where nothing is accepted as fake by both sides. It's always like one side might call it, the other doesn't, but there's never a unification. We live in two different worlds that are colliding at the moment. And I identify them by the worldviews that you would, I think, associate with 1776 and 1619. This is where you get the Trump versus Obama dialectic, which is so prevalent in so many movies that mirror what's happening on the world stage, as we talk about frequently. But it's getting even deeper. And in recent days, I went to go see Sinners, and the trailer for Final Destination has been quite revealing. So if you're not familiar with it, Final Destination came out a year before 9/11, about a plane crash. Death misses a few and hunts them down. Well, this new movie that comes out next month is a prequel to the first one, or it goes back in time and it shows that, no, the plane crash incident was the result of a previous incident where there was a prophecy that something was going to happen to the Space Needle. The person who warned everybody caused death to pass, like, not going to do it right now, puts it off, strikes back with the airplane, but now death is coming around. Final Destination, 25 years later, Bloodlines, and now the Space Needle, and I don't know if it's the Seattle one, but it's a Space Needle. It's the main feature of the movie, and the movie poster has a giant flaming skull right above it. Which, this is interesting, because I remember we were looking at the $20 bill. You fold it up, you get 9/11. We were looking at the 100. You fold it up, it looks like a Space Needle with an EMP above it. And the $100 bill and the idea of an EMP, a blackout, a reset, is actually not uncommon in the canon of predictive programming. I was looking at the movie where Sonic the Hedgehog is running through Seattle, dropping bombs in the sewers, and it blows up and it floods. He runs up the Space Needle. You have this detonation going off at the Space Needle, and then he's paid in $100 bills. And then in Free Guy, they hit the reset button on the city, because there's about to be this NPC awakening, and the evil CEO orders one of his employees hit the reset button, and the guy who does it is wearing a $100 bill on his chest. And I think we could even tie this in to the Netflix series The 100, which has a space station falling. We've talked about season 1, episode 13, and there's been a lot of 113 and 311 associated with the idea of the destruction of the Space Needle. So in other words, 311 and 9/11 are 311 and 113 are associated with the Space Needle in the same way that 9/11 is associated with the Twin Towers in the body of predictive programming, which exists. Predictive programming is not a conspiracy theory. Anybody who says so hasn't done their research, because they would have no way to explain away what we are presenting. You can't say it's cherry picked. You can't say it's Texas sharpshooter fallacy, because we're talking about real-time alignments between entertainment on mainstream platforms and fake simulated news events. Real-time alignments, not possible unless you're willing to entertain the notion that writers are psychic and prophets, and that Hollywood are a bunch of channelers of some kind of zeitgeist script for the universe, And this is why simulation theory is so popular. In fact, let me get into this really quick. I'm looking at the screen. You can see it. Final Destination Bloodlines comes out May 16th. There's the skull above the Space Needle. But let me play this clip here because this is something interesting. It's Joe Rogan on his podcast is talking about Heather McDonald. Now, if you remember, Heather McDonald is a comedian, and she was talking about how, I think what she said was, okay, she was actually kind of criticizing anti-vaxxers. And she said that she got vaxxed a couple of times and that Jesus loves her the best. And as soon as she said this, she fell and hit her head audibly on the stage, like knocked against the floor. And of course, Heather McDonald was talked about by Jurassic Liars because her name, Donald, hit in the head. Her birthday is Donald Trump's birthday. So that's how she kind of came into my awareness. But I remember this scene. And at the time we were, talking about, is this real? Is this fake? And because it was almost like too perfect. Somebody who's vaxxed mocks Jesus and falls and hits her head during a comedy skit. And anti-vaxxers are like, yep, that's it. The vax did it. They took the bait. So Joe Rogan is talking about this, and he's saying it's probably scripted. But listen to his conclusion here.
This girl, Heather McDonald, blacked out on stage while she was making jokes about being vaccinated. And then she blacks out and cracks her skull. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Yes. Legitimately.
Now, again, he's talking about Heather McDonald. Let me make sure your sound... Okay, is it loud enough? Okay, good.
There was the first time in my life where I was like, there's no... I was like, they're f***ing with us.
Yeah.
They're just... Something's... that can't be so dead on. Like, this is like God is a script writer.
This is like God is a script writer. That's what I wanted to hone in on. And I'm saying, yeah, there is a script writer, but it's not God. And I look at the symbol of the monolith as it pertains to the movie screen and the ubiquitous worldview control of the monopolized media globally. And I think the media monopoly, which it is, the worldview monopoly, is in fact a replacement for the monotheism as the way to bind all mankind under a universal worldview. And the scriptwriter is man, and it's pervasive. And we can't really understate how interconnected it all really is, how synchronized it is. And this is what trips people up. They have a hard time believing that news can be synchronized with entertainment. So I make it really simple. We have to reduce things to the simplest terms. The information propaganda is coming from the same sources as the entertainment propaganda. It's not hyperbole to call a mainstream movie propaganda. Like, yeah, there may be some messages that don't relate to propaganda, to the news media of the time. There may be some deeper meaning to it, but no, it's all been co-opted. And that's not an exaggeration. And the way you can tell in advance if something's going to contain pertinent messaging is its popularity. You wonder why all these terrible movies and bad entertainers are so popular. It's because the messaging is more important than the aesthetic value. And I'm continually making the point, I'm going to go watch this movie and bring back something to show you this pattern that we're consistently observing. And the more recent one was Sinners, which had the element of black versus white, Klansmen, vampires. And it related in several ways to the stabbing psyop, which is being dragged into the racial context, the stabbing of Austin Metcalf. And in this context, the movie has an actor playing his own twin, and his twin dies bleeding in his arms. That's what happened at the track meet. And that kind of parallel is just one of several. Many have to do with the themes that are brought up in the movie as it relates to what is brought up in this particular event. And this event is being treated like, I describe Austin Metcalf, how he's being treated by the right as a right-wing Trayvon Martin. They're trying to spark a White Lives Matter type thing. And it's being pushed quite heavily on social media. I don't think it's organic. And it's not a coincidence that it's being pushed by a January 6er. Anybody in January 6th, any of these people who were supposedly arrested, they're all actors. They're all provocateurs, agitators, actors on the world stage. They're not organic. Like the QAnon shaman, anybody he interacts with is similarly an actor. They do not interact with the real world, with real cases. So in the stabbing case, it's a guaranteed fake hoax. And you can guarantee this is just based on Jake Lang's interaction with the father. All right, let me see who's here in chat, and then we'll continue. P. Trippa, Roxy W, Ted Stryker, Diana, thank you for joining. Tunex, Mizell, Penguinati, Auto Hoaxer, Flozic, Garrett Summers. We got an 88 here so far. And by the way, I was looking at predictive programming in Back to the Future, all kinds of 88 references, somehow associated with the Twin Towers, which also has some memorial with 88 lights or something. Now, again, I don't practice numerology, but we're noticing these repeated themes and patterns. And if you've looked into any of the mystery schools, the Masonic stuff, it's all about numbers. It really comes down to symbolism, ciphers, numbers. And I will be taking calls, Leo friend asks. In fact, I'm going to put a link in the chat. And you can take this link and you can join in. It'll put you in a waiting room where you can listen until you're called in. Hello from Holland, says Marcel. Okay, I think we are about ready to take calls. I have a lot more to go over, which will continue to go. What's up, Rebel Black says Seattle too soon. Seattle is slated to be destroyed on June 11th. That's why it's relevant that this recent movie trailer came out and it's forecasting what's happening. What happened right up to 9/11? And I have something else to bring up related to this. But what happened in the lead up to 9/11 in the popular imagination? Well, you saw Deep Impact, Armageddon. You saw all kinds of movies with exploding towers. So many examples, like the X-Files spinoff, The Lone Gunman. Like, we were experiencing 9/11 through entertainment before it happened in real life, as is the pattern. This is a consistent and repeated pattern. And right now, we're seeing a buildup of Space Needle devastation. So I think it's likely that it could be now. But let me bring this up first. In Francis Ford Coppola's film Megalopolis, there was an erratic Soviet satellite named Carthage in the movie. It serves as a catalyst for societal transformation. The satellite falls in New Rome, which is like New York, symbolizing the collapse of the old system and creating the crisis that Caesar Catalina exploits to advance his utopian vision. Well, Trump is Caesar Catalina. If you follow the parallels, Trump and Caesar, and then you have Obama relates to the mayor who orchestrates the assassination attempt. And this ties into why Trump had the picture of his assassination attempt survival, where he's chanting fight, fight, and he's got the blood on his face. They put a portrait of that over where Obama's portrait used to be. There's this connection between Obama and Trump and this assassination theme that is in many movies. And it's a consistent pattern that we pointed out. But in this case, Caesar Catalina uses the incident with the Russian satellite to unite the world. Now, right now, if you look in the news, there's this Russian satellite called 2553. And it's a suspected weapons program. We're talking about space nukes, which kind of ties in with one of the video games we happen to be living through. If you look at the overlap between the fictional universes and what's happening on the world stage, U.S. officials and analysts fear that the satellite is part of a program to develop a nuclear EMP weapon capable of disabling the entire satellite constellation of Starlink. So I brought this up before, the idea that they could EMP Starlink and they would rain down on us, like forcing lockdowns, space junk helmet. You thought masks were annoying? Wait till they make you wear a space junk helmet. And space debris, long-lasting orbital debris threatening satellites globally. There's a few things here that they're pointing out about these Russian satellites. One of them appears to be even in a, I believe they put it in a path capable of breaking something on our side. So we can find that piece. But anyway, this is posted by Violet in Gilded. Putin's secret space weapon, Kremlin's mysterious Cosmos 2553 satellite, is fitted with a, quote, dummy warhead, a forerunner to a nuke that could wipe out rival spacecraft and cause chaos on Earth. Now, Francis Ford Coppola said his movie is about what's about to happen. The fall of Rome. America as Rome. Make Rome great again. Leo Friend says, in Megalopolis, Shia LaBeouf's character signs $100 bills, and he's hung upside down in front of a $100 bill. Yeah, and he has Trump's birthday, which is also relevant in this. Okay, I'm going through your comments. I'm going to open up phones. I have somebody in the waiting room. Till says, Tim, check out the thumbnail taken from the Rogan Trump podcast. Okay. Let me go ahead and take a look. Okay, I don't know if I can click links that are posted in the chat. Someone will have to help me with that. Describe it for me at a minimum. Okay, let me go ahead and open up phones here. We have a caller in the waiting room.
Hey, Tim.
Caller? Hey, what's going on?
Just a lot of stuff to talk about with Megalopolis. One little correction I wanted to point out. Shia LaBeouf doesn't have Donald Trump's birthday, but his birthday is 6/11.
Oh, 6/11. Okay. 6/11, which is even more pertinent. Because I said the 6/11 Seattle destruction has been consistently tied to the $100 bill in the body of predictive programming. Yeah, for some reason I thought he had Trump's birthday, but no, 6/11 makes even more sense.
And the 6/11 code, at least we've seen, it's been used consistently across this radicalized far-right domestic terrorist narrative. Donald Trump being shot at 6:11 p.m. in the film Sound of Freedom. The pendant the main character was given had Timothy 6/11 on it, and Timothy McVeigh was executed on 6/11 as well. So there's this consistent line of it. And I like what you said before. It's not that I practice numerology, or you or me, or that we believe it. We are merely observing or decoding the religion of the world stage directors. That doesn't necessarily mean that we agree with it, but it is still appearing in this body of predictive programming.
Yes. And the 6/11 thing, I noticed this thing and I realized, wait, it's consistently associated with domestic violent extremism. 9/11 is the external threat coming in, the alien invader. So I think the inversion of it makes sense, the 6 being the upside down 9. So I look 6/11, 9/11, and this is their code. It's there. It's consistent. And you could even find 11/6 with similar themes. Like in Batman, Gotham's underwater, 11/6, and the Riddler's army, symbolizing Q, I think, blow up a dam and flood the polls, flood the election. And the GOP's midterm slogan was flood the polls. We also have Oppenheimer. The film was 11 miles long, weighed 600 pounds, and Oppenheimer wears a badge K6. So a lot of 11/6 associated with domestic violent extremism and the nuke. And I think these things are related.
Right, 6/11, 11/6. But what we've looked at is almost the ascension of 3/11, 6/11, 9/11. And the 3/11 seems to be tied to some kind of invisible threat or lockdowns, because you had pointed out that with Wall-E, Directive 113, which is a backward 3/11, was tied to the command to keep people in space until Earth was fully, like to lock them down in space until Earth was able to grow land again. 3/11, March 11, 2020 is the day the World Health Organization officially declared the corona, the crown thing, to be a pandemic. And there's just a lot to go off this, and this code is consistent. And I am of the opinion it's to subconsciously, I think numbers are stored in our brain in a unique way, and the recall of it is a little different than imagery or sounds. And the reason why it's there is some very advanced form of mesmerism or hypnosis that I don't fully understand yet, but I can't think of any other reason. And I don't necessarily like the idea that it's inside jokes. It could be a form of decoding for other initiates in the know, but I also think it could be used to help people just accept whatever is coming, even if it's staged fiction.
Interesting. As far as these numbers go, like, what is the point of it? Why would they put it out there if we weren't meant to see it? But then we're also not meant to interpret it. But one thing for sure is that there's an esoteric and an exoteric, meaning that the initiates do have the ability to look at this and take away completely different messaging. So I think it might be the secret language the insiders use, so that if you're in the club, nobody has to directly tell you anything. But if you read the numbers, you have an idea of what it really would mean. And we have applied this often, I mean, pretty often, and it's pretty reliable. And one more point here, because I hear some people sometimes say, there's no way they could plan all this nuance. Well, they're not planning a week in advance. By all indications, there's a plan that goes for the next astrological, the next sign of the zodiac comes in a couple thousand years. Like they're planning big long-term ages or aeons, and then they're planning the century, and then the decade, and then within that. So I think that when you look at the long-term planning that goes into writing our history that they're performing for us on the world stage, it's perfectly explainable. 9/11 was easily planned before the towers were built. And there are indicators in the body of, well, predictive programming that would suggest this, including Space Odyssey 2001. They came out at the same time. That movie foreshadowed the destruction of the Twin Towers, which weren't even completely built when the movie was released.
Yeah, and to think of it in terms of broad strokes is really good because it's how you do an art project, right? If you start out with a very high level outline, then you narrow it down to a script, and then you get actors, then you get, it's put up for a bid for which director, which studio will pay for it. And that's essentially what the world stage system is. They write out history so far in advance in broad strokes. And then as they near these times, they use the existing entertainment system or how much control they can exert, and distribute it that way. And it's seen through entertainment, it's seen through government, it's seen through academia, really the whole, I think it was the GAME was the acronym used. It's, what is it? Government, academia, media, and education, right? It's really just distributed all that way.
Yes, the GAME program, entertainment. Yeah, the idea that entertainment is separate from the news media is one of the big blind spots that keeps people from seeing the big picture. And we're looking at this thing as a gestalt, as concerted messaging across all platforms, assuming all of it has been co-opted. And the evidence is there. The existence of psyops that necessitate the cooperation between all these disparate entities, government, media, the actors, DHS, law enforcement, hospitals, the fact that they're all complicit in it tells us that, no, this is an ongoing operation, but it's not like these are sporadic fake events or they do simulated news once in a while. No, actually, it's systemic fakery. And there is a total synchronization between all of the mass entertainment and the news to the point where it's used to frame our perspectives on every incoming event. And there's a reason why people fell in love with Luigi, the killer. They're prepped. The programming is there. It's a form of marketing and propaganda. It's covert, but it's a consistent thing. So what do you think about this? We have this Russian satellite that's loose right now. And didn't Francis Ford Coppola said his movie was going to come true?
Yeah, and that's something that happens in the film. I think they had a Russian satellite called Carthage or something like that crashes, and that's a prominent scene in that film. And that film is just a mishmash of what seems like things that are currently happening on the world stage with almost no rhyme or reason. I didn't enjoy it, but I highly recommend people watch it for the sake of being able to draw these comparisons that we've done here. And what I wanted to tell you, because I think in a previous episode, you were of the opinion that the film Conclave was not necessarily in this body of predictive programming. It's like, Pope Francis was at an elderly age. It's possible for a film like that to be made, to be timed in such a way. Where I differ with that is it's actually based on a book that was written in 2016 by a Roman Catholic. And the film was released in October. And what's strange about it is everyone's talking about the interpretation of the ending, the twist, and all those things. I noted that in the film, during the conclave, a bomb goes out outside the voting conclave that causes like the top chandelier, like the area, to explode and crash down. They don't die, but throughout the film, there are these several allusions to explosions just happening right outside the Vatican, which I thought was curious. And when we talk about shaping our worldview, I've been studying, meta religions. I've been looking at every single religious text. And in the Book of Mormon, the first prophecy recorded in the Book of Mormon is the eventual destruction of the Roman Catholic Church. It's a twisting of the Bible. Now, many people view Revelation 13, the Whore of Babylon, riding atop the seven-headed beast. They say that's the Catholic Church. I think that's a limited perspective. It actually represents much more. But what I foresee is taking these religious texts and decorating on top of it a false prophecy that they can manifest on our screens to misdirect people's interpretations of, say, the Bible, Revelation. And so many people right now in the news, even, it seems like paralleling. I don't know if you've seen Conclave. In the film, there was all these intrigue between the different cardinals and who could be elected. Oh, this one was involved in this scandal and this scandal. The news is like that right now. They're, going through a fine-tooth comb with all of the different cardinals. And I'm thinking, when Pope Francis was elected, or Ratzinger, or John Paul, I don't remember this much media spectacle around the conclave. It kind of just happened. It's like, oh, we got a new pope, right?
Right. Well, I look at the timing of his death and Klaus Schwab's, similar archetypes. They kind of look the same age. They both exit the world stage at the same time. And I'm like, this is another twin thing. There's been a lot of this twin stuff recently, and I see that and I'm thinking, okay, well, yeah, people die, obviously, but there's no reason to believe any of this stuff, especially something of this significance. And the fact that it happened on Easter, it just says PR stunt, fake miracle, meant for the religious minded. He might have died 6 months ago. He might still be alive, in my perspective. But now that I'm looking at the conspicuous timing of his death, and there's some more stuff to this, I would say Conclave is likely then purposefully released. And yeah, the bomb situation, I'll keep it. I didn't know about that, but that's worth paying attention to.
Right. I posted the clip in the chat if you ever want to check it out. You have to scroll up a bit though. And it's just very strange because this at least in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, they have this view that the papacy runs the whole world and all this stuff. I don't accept that. In fact, I have quite the opposite view, that the papacy represents the old world religious structure. And it's really on its way out, in my opinion. Everyone's asking me, who do you think is going to be the next pope? Is this? I'm like, I would be basically, if a brand new pope is elected, sits in the seat of Peter, and everything goes totally fine and stuff, I will be surprised. I'll leave it at that. I don't want to give any hard predictions, but I'm just saying, if everything goes business as usual, everything is fine, I will be shocked.
Well, Elon Musk is my pope. I think Pope Elon has been. I think he has fulfilled that role for the longest time, and I would associate the Falcon rocket with the obelisk. Because the Pope prays to the obelisk at St. Peter's Basilica 3 times a day, and the rocket to space is the obelisk, which promises resurrection to heaven, and the Falcon represents their new god, the divine androgen child, the crown-conquering child Horus, associated with what? Mars. And Musk, Mars, it's all the new age thing. It goes together pretty well. So when I see Musk and the rocket, I thought, yeah, this is the new pope. And then Werner von Braun's book, Mars, A Technical Tale, said that the dictatorship on Mars under the Elon would be structured like the papacy. So Pope Elon has made these old popes irrelevant. You're right. He's the new age pope.
And the hierarchy in the papacy, yeah, it's not surprised at all that they would use that as inspiration, because it is so compartmentalized. When people have trouble comprehending the world stage influences on our media, it's like, just think of religious hierarchies, think of business corporations, think of military compartmentalization. There's this structure where there are different levels of power, need to know basis, things work out that way down. That's why I don't buy any of the stuff that's in the news about the papacy. But Pope Elon being the space, that's the universal religion, right? And that's why I see Catholicism just going on its way out. It's too old. Right? It's just too old.
Well, the word Catholic means universal, and it's all the Abrahamic faiths, I think, are part of this old model, and they're being replaced by the new. And I think that the new one is just the old ones, but it's transitioning the traditional mythology for science fiction. And it's a replacement faith that's meant to be, again, universal. And you'll notice all the different religious denominations believe in space travel. They believe that we're going to Mars. They bought into this new religion without knowing that's what it is. It's a cosmology. It's not a real model of the reality we inhabit, in my view.
Absolutely. And in fact, it's actually a different God. When you compromise on the creator, like the creation, and think we're from a big bang, giant galaxy, all that stuff, it is quite literally a different God, even if you call yourself Christian and stuff, because the fourth commandment is tied to the week of creation. And if you deviate from that, like every single popular denomination does in existence, period, then it's quite literally a different God. It is. I mean, the Father of Jesus created heaven and earth, the sea, and all fountain waters in 6 days and rested on the seventh. But to the Protestants, Catholics, to the Abrahamic religions, if you will, actually it was from a big bang and over billions of years. And I remember this, early 2000s or something, there was this big debate, is evolution real? And they had these actor Christians who were all like, no, it's not. And then they were easily debunked, moved on. Now we just, come on, evolution is just a reality. The Big Bang is a reality. We're in an expanding universe. This is axiomatic to the world religion.
Yes. And hey, what do you think about Joe Rogan noting the incident with Heather McDonald hitting the ground being so perfectly scripted that he said, God must have scripted this? You see how people reflexively reach for a higher power to explain weird synchronicities or coincidences that seem to be impossible unless somehow staged?
Yeah, I did laugh at that a lot because I'm like, man, he's right. Just which God, right? It's not the creator of heaven and earth. It's the prophets of Baal. That's why I keep using that analogy. It's like all of these talking heads like Joe Rogan and such who affirm the reality of things on the world stage without acknowledging its fakery. They are unwitting prophets of Baal. They are worshiping it. They are pushing a different God, which is just man, a collection of man fooling man through the existing infrastructure. Well, if you can't point out who those men are, it's God. Yeah, that's the God that they worship.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great system. I mean, as far as it's effective. This idea of creating God constructs and then working through it as a proxy and people not realizing, it's like the man behind the curtain thing. And we do live in that type of situation where people are mesmerized by the magic show and they don't look backstage. And yeah, Joe Rogan and others, all these big podcasters, they're so insulated, they may not be aware of it. That's why they seem so mind blown when they see these glitches in the matrix, because they think they're seeing glitches in the matrix. I've heard him default to, this could only be true because we live in a simulation so many times. And that's a default explanation for things that don't make sense on TV. And I'm saying that is a problematic way of looking at things. It means you're confusing what is broadcast for the real thing. And it is the direction most people go. But obviously we see the consequences of that. Deeper levels of mind programming for alternative thinkers.
And the way out of it is identifying with specificity the fakery. And something I find curious about the synchromystics is they seem to downplay the fakery, if even talking about it at all. Instead, they just stay at the mind blown, like, whoa, look, Back to the Future, Biff Tannen, Trump, when he was at this conference, he looks like Biff Tannen, the guys behind it. I'm like, well, great, that's compelling evidence that whoever coordinated that press conference with Trump, that means that they used the trappings of Back to the Future to stage it that way. Instead, they don't ever go that far. They're just like, whoa, isn't that weird? That's kind of strange. Simulation-y, right?
I was there for a long time. I would notice these things, specifically the subtext in movies, and I thought, okay, there's something at work here, and it's evidence of synchronicities working through these big movies. And so it gets you into this realm of entertaining the idea that we live in a simulation. But once you see through it, once you recognize the intentionality, and you can arrive at this by just looking at the drills, the mundane political agendas behind these things. Once you see how it's just propaganda in the information, propaganda in the entertainment, it's a form of advertising and manipulation, then it's no longer mind-blowing. It's predictable. Now I see coincidences in the movies and the news, and I'm like, here's another one. It's just routine for us. Whereas others are like with the Luigi thing, there were people who thought that certain coincidences with Luigi in the story meant we're in a video game. And that default explanation, it's kind of short-sighted and a bit lazy, and it's a cul-de-sac. It's an intellectual cul-de-sac, and it holds a lot of people in a I guess you would call it a simulation. Like they enter into this alternate reality game. It's a form of, I would say, like almost like a religious paradigm where you have certain things that don't align with the real world. It's kind of culty, divorced from reality in a little bit, in a way.
Well,
in a way.
It's a way of mystifying the fakery. So for Trump being shot at 6:11 p.m., was taken up by Steve Bannon, who claimed that was tied to Ephesians 6:11, that Trump wears the full armor of God. In the Luigi story, the number 286 appeared all over the place in his follower count. There was Owen Schroyer of Infowars did this TikTok waving finger soy face reaction breakdown of it, and my favorite part, the reason why I had to call it out, he tied it to the Pokédex number 286 was Breloom or something. He tied that to Proverbs 28:6 and claimed that was right, just total nonsense. But really, that's how you mystify the fakery. These Easter eggs being planted shows foreknowledge, shows artistry, shows that it was staged.
Right. That's the main point of it, I think, is they want to mystify the fakery. So again, you see a glitch in the matrix, as in the propaganda, and now you think reality is fake. And that's the purpose of it. It's the same thing with the Mandela effect, that they want to take you out of objective reality, so you're no longer a witness. You're no longer a credible witness. So on the one hand, you're like, well, I think these planes are CGI, and this whole event was a simulation. But I also think reality is a simulation, and the tags on my underwear change, and logos are constantly morphing. Like, if you're Mandela affected, you're no longer a valid eyewitness for anything, and you shouldn't be telling me about the body counts in the latest mass shooting, because you're saying reality's fake. So what does it mean to say that news is fake at that point?
Yeah, and I think required viewing for everyone here, anyone watching this VOD, is Mirage Men. I was about halfway through it when you started streaming, so I'll keep going through it. But from what I've seen so far, it is absolutely just shocking. It's like the Air Force really worked on ruining a guy's life for the sake of maintaining national security by feeding him false information to feed into the UFO delusion. Just, decorate the idea of aircraft research with actually you saw UFOs, and the NSA even got involved and started intercepting some of the messages he was decoding to give him. So they just fed him information that already fit into the biases that he had. And that's essentially what's happening on the world stage with the Kate Perry space launch. Most people are against DEI and think women are incompetent and aren't qualified to do these kinds of things. So of course they'll call it fake, but with bad evidence and not seeing the big picture at the same time.
Right, because Musk, when he does it, it's real. Elon Musk's rockets are real, Bezos's are fake. It just depends if you're Republican or Democrat. Like, these are political opinions, and they're really shallow. Because if you really thought Bezos was faking something on this scale, it would be, if people really thought it, like these big channels, and they really followed through the logic, they would realize, okay, this is malfeasance, this is fraud, this is propaganda, and it invalidates so much of what even NASA claims to be true about the world that we inhabit, that it's kind of interesting. It's conspicuous to me that nobody takes it to the next step. Like, it's yesterday's news that they might have faked this thing. Like, they don't take it that far. Same thing with the Trump Butler, Pennsylvania hoax. There are people who will say, yeah, that ear thing was fake, but the fireman really got shot. Or they're willing to entertain it was fake, but they don't follow the leads. Because what it says is, well, your media is working together, both sides. They're both in on it. The Secret Service is in on it. And anyway, it opens up a can of worms, and just seems like they're not equipped to confront that can of worms. They don't want that depth. They're just happy with a few memes, some engagement, and it's on to the next thing.
The implications are too huge, basically, because for something like that to be fake, that means it would require the involvement of both political parties. It would require police involvement. It would require all of the audience members who are in the film, the quote unquote live footage, to be involved. And people cannot comprehend that scale of fakery, even though it's standard operating procedure. It's really not that crazy. And it correlating to media fiction, it's like, we call that propaganda. So people react in very angry ways. They call it, like, saying you're crazy. Why would you ever say that? Or you're a libtard. I've been called that a couple of times for saying that was fake. And I'm like, no, what happened in Butler is not a unique thing, right? It's not unique. There are so many other examples, and it's par of the course for this world stage shaping, worldview shaping that's done by our governments. And going back to Mirage Men, I think it's fascinating that it does focus on the Air Force, because I think in pop culture, it's pretty acceptable to call out like the CIA, the NSA, also NASA as well, right? Like, but the Air Force, it's tied to the Space Force program. I think it makes perfect sense that the Air Force would be at the forefront of disinformation campaigns, especially because they control the sky, right? They have seen what's above the Kármán line, if you will, right? And then,
well, yeah, look, I think too, because I'm wondering too, I'm like, why is it that all these UFO channels are so popular? Do people really care that much, or is it artificially propped up? And what it looks like to me is that the Air Force has indeed, it's the same thing, because yeah, Air Force is real, but Space Force is where it gets to the realm of mind control and fakery. But they would have an interest in maintaining these illusions. And I also think that they're behind chemtrails. Like, I think a lot of the popular conspiracy theories that never go away, that are obviously being, I guess, promulgated by some entity somewhere for money or mind control purposes, I think they're behind, like the Air Force is probably behind chemtrails. And one thing that's true too is that the Air Force recognized the problem that persistent chemtrails represented when it comes to you're sending your aircraft to go do something, you're leaving a trail, they can see where you're going. So they already figured out back in the 50s how to calculate the altitudes to avoid to not leave persistent trails, because they realized it's purely the result of hot jet exhaust at certain altitudes in the rarefied cold air. And that's it. So if the Air Force has known that condensation trails are predictable and avoidable, then that debunks the idea of chemtrails. It's been debunked before. I mean, it was never even a valid theory. But the fact that it's consistently promoted, and it's been promoted, I think it started actually with AM radios coast to coast. Art Bell. Art Bell started the chemtrail nonsense. And that's relevant here because he also platformed Whitney Strieber, who the guy said he was abducted by aliens and probed. He also, with Whitney Strieber, wrote the first climate change science fiction called The Coming Superstorm. So anyway, I think these are all operations.
I just had a thought as well that depending on what level a psyop or a staged or news produced event occurs, that's the department involved. So if it's in the skies, it's the Air Force. If it's in space, it's the NASA. If it's in the internet, it's the NSA. If it's in the streets, it's the CIA. Just a thought, just a correlative thought. I don't have any proof for that. It was just a intuition. But in Mind War by Lieutenant Michael Aquino, he does talk about collaborations with the PSYOP department and the NSA and others. That's not, collaborations between departments is not unheard of. That's completely like fine, right? And yeah, and I think knowing the origins of such things like chemtrails and even the UFO phenomenon, it's like that's hugely important, because this thing that grows so big, you need to go, where did it start? And in the Mirage Men documentary, when he was told by someone from the OSI and the Air Force, he said, yeah, this was intentional. This was made. He still didn't believe it. And he was even institutionalized. And I think that documentary, I think it came out in 2013, independent documentary, absolutely like required viewing, because that is a much more horrifying atrocity committed by the government. They made someone go into an insane asylum, right?
Well, also consider too how they use this movement they created around UFOs to do conferences to get the names and addresses and information of anybody who went to those hotels. These are big honeypots. And I'm like, okay, they're honeypotting the people who might be risks, who might see too much, know too much, and getting them into a group they can study and then disinform with these limited hangout operations. And so when I went to a Flat Earth conference, the first thing was I was approached by a very questionable figure. And he was like, have you read the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion? And I laughed because I thought he was joking. I thought everybody knew that was a hoax. And then these other guys pushing chemtrails, this other booth is so these are like standard conspiracy theories that all get lumped into the same group. And I looked at this thinking, okay, wait a minute here. This is some type of an intelligence gathering operation. I think all these people with a lot of propaganda and CDs and productions, I think most of them there are attached to intelligence, and we have evidence for this. I mean, we had really terrible criminals on parole who were made the face of this conference, and it was kind of a pattern. So it seems to me that, yeah, there's law enforcement, there's feds, there's intelligence agents all over the conspiracy subculture.
Yeah, and if in the past they did it with conferences, and they still do, you can only imagine how they do it online today with Discord and friend groups. I will say, I think it was like 2018 or so in my friend group, we had someone who we proved was a Fed actually. By I didn't do it. I know some other people who looked into him, reverse engineered some of his usernames and stuff, and looked at dehash. He was actually a former paramilitary trooper and was married to someone who attended DEF CON and others. He was literally a Fed, and the way he talked, the topics he would bring up, we were just like, who are you again? Like, where did you come from? Why are you asking us these questions? So
it's admitted that the feds can't directly go into Discord, but it's admitted that they pay people on contracts to go into Discord servers. And this is one of the reasons why I kind of backed away from Discord, is that we had a large number of individuals that I noticed a pattern with. A lot of them were, for some reason, Canadians, but they would always promote the trending stuff that were being promoted by all of the big influencers, the same talking points, whether it was anti-Pakistani, anti-Islam, anti-vax, but it was like on a clockwork. They would all promote the same stuff, and they would promote the exact type of things that would get our servers banned. And these were individuals who had nothing to do all day but 8 hours a day, sit in the voice chat talking to everybody that would come in. And I was always uncomfortable by this, because these individuals were known for spewing racial slurs and stuff that would throw people off. So I thought, why is this person trying to be the main voice in the chat and trying to associate with me? And I realized it's guilt by association. And the Discord servers can take screen caps. So yeah, it's a huge honeypot operation.
And it's a great way to discredit any serious inquiry to these kinds of things, because that's essentially what they did to the UFO researchers. It's like, by making him look crazy, then it's like, oh yeah, don't even bother. The whole UFO thing is crazy, and no one even addresses the original claim of what kind of research was the Air Force doing with those links. Right. And yeah, it's just fancy misdirection. That's all it is. And I hope that people aren't to the point where they cling to the lies like what happened in the movie. So anyway, that's all I had to say. I want
excellent. Well, hey, thanks for calling in, and call back anytime.
For sure. Thanks.
Okay, so Till had said that on this particular podcast, Joe Rogan has his hand pressed against his temple. Okay, like the Joker hand sign, well, the Travis Bickle. Although in Joker 2, the Harlequin character did the Travis Bickle gun to head thing. Sam Day says, is the Illuminati real? Well, here's what is real. What is verifiably true here is that the masses are in a box mentally. They have a worldview that is all-encompassing. And of course, anything that goes outside of it is a conspiracy theory. If it's a non-approved conspiracy theory, it's ignored. A lot of conspiracy theories are actually allowed to fester so that they can be chastised. But everybody does live within this box, and I would call them the programmed. And what the programmed don't know is that the news fakery is what steers our pre-written history. So if you think about it, 5 years of fake news or news that is influenced by fakery becomes 5 years of history. Just stretch it back to the decades, and you can see, okay, our history has been bent. Who's bending it? Whoever controls the flow of information, the programmers. So there is a programming class above the programmed. And the programmers would be in all these different fields that are involved with mass mind control. For example, politics, entertainment, education, and all these different fields are influenced by this central monolithic worldview warfare operation. And this is why we have a unified space program. Everybody agrees on our collective history, the big collective lies, contemporary myths. The purpose of a 9/11 is it's a way to get everybody on the same sheet. 2020 got us all on the same sheet. So it's absolutely true that there is a programming class, but not all the programmers are fully aware or deprogrammed. My contention here is that the programmers, for the most part, are in the box almost as much as everybody else. They're just selectively let out. The IPS think tank represents the only real effort to deprogram and recognize the programming for what it is. No conspiracy theorists do this. And then if you look at the iconography, the symbolism, the all-seeing eye on the pyramid, 1776, the architecture. Architecture is how the secret societies communicate. If you look at Freemasonry, it's the stone masons, the stone, the building of these structures, it's all allegorical and symbolic, has double meanings. But it's safe to say that there is an insider or an enlightened class. And the word Illuminati, the term, you can use it kind of loosely. But if you look at the basic structure of any initiatory society, we'll just take, for example, Freemasonry, but this is true with the OTO, the Order of the Templars, the Orient, and all these offshoots. And even in Wicca, they do this. If you go into the organized groups, the initiates are brought in to the temple with a bag over their head. Like, so it's a wool sack. You know the expression, the wool over your eyes, being hoodwinked. And once they're brought in, they swear an oath that they won't tell any secrets. Just like in the courts, they swear on the Bible. That's Masonic. And once you swear the oaths, then they take the bag off your head and you're, quote, shown the light. So the temple is lit by 3 candles on the altar, and you see all these people that you didn't know were in the club. And they're all wearing these costumes and aprons and jewelry and hats, etc. And then you're told a little bit more with each degree, and you're sworn to secrecy. This is a form of security clearance system. Somebody high up with high security clearance would have certain doors open to them. You wouldn't be able to participate in a PSYOP if you didn't have some kind of a security clearance. It's just like with the military. These are secrets that are necessary for national security. And we're taking these secrets, even though we haven't been brought into their system, even though we haven't been shown the light, we kind of figured it out on our own. But the concept of Illuminati means those who've been shown the initiated or been shown the light, whereas the rest of us live in darkness. And in the initial ceremony, when somebody gets brought into the Masonic thing, they're told that you've been shown the light, but everybody out there is in the wilderness of darkness. You actually, when you knock on the door, you're meant to say something to the effect of, I've long wandered in the darkness and I'm seeking the light. So once you're in the club, now you're in a group of people who recognize that those outside the temple, the profane, are hoodwinked. And the way that they're brought in is the bag over the head, the rope around the neck, a cable leash, a cable tow. So you're like a cow and you're ignorant and you live in darkness. So the message there is the ones who are shown the light, who have the security clearances, exist on another level than those who are still in ignorance and darkness. And my contention is those who believe the mainstream news, who believe headlines, who believe the propaganda reflexively are in darkness. They're hoodwinked. Mainstreamers are hoodwinked. Woke is hoodwinked. Alt woke is alt hoodwinked. None of them have been shown the light. The light is what happens when you remove the screen. The screen, the ubiquitous screen, is the new hoodwink. It's the wool over the eyes. And once you remove its presupposition of objective reality that you can observe and get an idea of what's going on in the world, once you remove that, then it all makes sense. So if there is an Illuminati, it's just those who are privy to how this thing works. And the IPS is something of a similar idea, but it's open source. You don't have to sign your name in blood. You don't have to perform any rituals where you're walking around with half your shirt off, missing a shoe, with a bag over your head. No, you just basically chat and ask for a wrench. And if you choose to pay $5 a month to become part of the Blue Wrench Lodge, you're welcome to, but it's not compulsory. And we're not going to rip out your guts, incinerate them, and scatter the ashes to the 4 winds if you tell our secrets. No penal codes. Apostates are not treated well. By the way, speaking of Masons, back in, I think this was 2006, they had Kanye West New chapter for a Masonic temple, April 20th, 2006. Canadian rocker Sam Roberts and hip-hop artist Kanye West cut the ribbon Tuesday evening on Toronto's freshly renovated Masonic temple, a venue with more rebirths than even Shirley MacLaine. Now, it doesn't mean he is a Mason, but somebody sent me that link, and he's kind of been in the news lately for things that I don't even want to talk about. I mean, you can only shock people so much. Like, what's next? How much further can you go? It probably will go further. Jungle Jim says, another 100 subs over the last few weeks. The raft is growing. It's keeping you warm and buoyant like the video. Yeah, we are expanding. The numbers are up, and it's only going to get better as we improve our analysis here and our model. And really quick, forget about flat versus round. We all have an internal model of the world that we exist within, which is based on our experiences, our education, our worldly wisdom, whatever we've accrued, but also our presuppositions and how we interpret things. Like, there's a lot that goes into our models of the world. The mainstream model of the world is reality is what I experience, plus what I'm told is happening, usually in other places. So it's really just you're getting a lot of information secondhand. It's outsourced by necessity. The conspiracy theorists have a slightly different model, and that one involves this idea of a nefarious controller that is being covered up by the mainstream. So they're mostly correct in that there's a conspiracy, but they're wrong in thinking that they're fighting against it. If you're part of the opposition to the mainstream, you're actually part of a dialectic they set up. You're on a team. You're not actually objecting to the Psywar. You're taking part in it. Listen to this really quick. Paper Michelian Pope, says Diana Southard. I haven't seen the pictures of him, but I on the. Actually, I did see one picture. They said he had like a bruise on his eye, which doesn't make sense because you'd think that they would put makeup on it. That's what the mortician does. So if there was a bruise on his eye, I don't know why they wouldn't have covered that up. But listen to this. This could be random, but this to me might suggest that we're looking at a staged timed death. Francis's age and time of death match his soccer club number, which it's a club in the Argentine club that he supported. So he was member 88235. He died at 88 at 2:35 a.m. Does that mean anything? I don't know. Although a few more of these things, these types of alignments, begins to create a picture here of, yeah, it's scripted and it might be a lot more nuanced than we think. But the general interpretation is going to be God or perhaps the universe. Something about the Kate Perry mission here, her hair. Why is her hair just kind of flared out to the side? How come it's not doing like Suni Williams? Just look at the comparison. Can anybody here that believes in space travel explain to me why Kate Perry's hair isn't levitating? What's going on? I mean, I realize that they only had 4 minutes in 0G, but what's the difference here? This is a dead giveaway. They have not been able to figure this out, and they're not getting any better. Thank you, Copaesthetic. 20 new Blue Wrench members. And I do plan to be using a lot more of the features with YouTube where I can put up videos for members only. I'm just trying to narrow down. I guess what I should do next, I have a Gabby Petito deep dive that I've been working on. I should fix that up tonight. A couple of other things. Based on the launch time on the Kate Perry launch, because they were all looking at the moon should have been below the horizon. It should not have been visible. Here's the information on it. The Blue Origin NS31 launched from West Texas, 31 by 104, north and west latitude, April 14th at 8:30 a.m. At that exact time, the near full moon was below the horizon, and the altitude was negative due to its position in the western sky. From the ground, they could not have seen the moon. At apogee, the extended horizon might have allowed a marginal view if it was just below the horizon, but given its altitude of -5 to -10, improbable that they would have seen it clearly, if at all. So the moon should not have been visible. And if you saw the footage, you can see the entire moon. Probably fake. Can I touch on the Epstein victim suicide? Yeah, I have Epstein fatigue. I have deep state fatigue. I have QAnon fatigue. At this point, I think it's all just a big hoax. You know, there's just been this endless, like, and the only person that you can really, I don't know, see, I guess Donald Trump, you know, how many times has he been on the flight? But I don't know. I can't really see anybody really ever exposing anything with this. The whole thing just seems like a farce. Does anybody still hold out hope that something's going to happen with Epstein? One of his so-called victims suicided. Just seems so fake to me. It seems like a made-for-TV conspiracy theory. A huge nothing burger. Like, this Epstein thing's like 10 years old. All this stuff about save the children, the truth's going to come out, mass arrests. It's a bunch of bad hopium. And I hate to, you know, dredge that up. I think we should just let it go. Violet Pangon says, Russian satellite with dummy warhead is spinning out of control in the news. Dummy warhead, fake nuke in the news. Yeah, isn't that interesting here that we're looking at the movie Megalopolis coming true in real time? I watched a pretty decent video by Calcified Lies, Final Destination, Bloodlines, Space Needle, Space Odyssey, and Wizard of Oz. He made a bunch of fascinating connections because remember, the Space Needle, Seattle, has this connection to the Wizard of Oz in the sense that Seattle's called the Emerald City. And of course, the Wizard of Oz, the movie Wicked, just came out. It was released on 11/3 when it was first screened. And it's part 1 of 2. And the end of this first part is when the Wicked Witch flies into the air and EMPs the Emerald City, total blackout. And then she's got all of her flying monkeys, which makes me think of drones. But there are some intriguing connections made here that I put a link to the movie. Final Destination, Bloodlines, upcoming American supernatural horror film, Final Destination film series, and the movie poster again has the Space Needle with a blowing up skull. Like this looks like an EMP or a Russian satellite falling onto it. And Violet had gone through the trailer, and look, on the trailer you have a timestamp on one of the phones in the scene, 113. What are the odds? Again, Directive 113, as the caller had said, is in Wall-E. It's the directive to abandon ship, get into the space arcs. You can no longer live on Earth. Okay, I think we've covered most of... Oh, I didn't get into this. Okay, one thing too. Kate Perry and others can't claim that we're sexist for calling it fake because she said, quote, that they were going to put the ass back in astronauts. Like, I didn't even know that it was in... here's what she said. Space is going to be glam. Let me tell you something. If I could take glam up with me, I would do that. We're going to put the ass in astronaut. So I thought about that. I'm like, wait, this is reminding me of Lance Bass. So if you don't remember the story, Lance Bass from NSYNC was supposed to go to space. And here's an article from several years ago. It says, it was pretty barbaric. This is Lance Bass from NSYNC. It's a pretty standard medical test for aspiring astronauts, but nothing prepared Bass for how horrific and degrading his colonoscopy in Russia would be. According to the singer, he was awake during the procedure and the Russian doctors laughed at him. He said it was barbaric. I'm sitting there and they're doing the procedure with a lot of doctors in the room. I have tears coming down my eyes because it hurts so bad and they're laughing. I asked my translator why they're laughing. Anyway, they make this horrible joke while he's on the table. Okay, so I'm thinking this is bizarre. I had to look up the story because I remember, wasn't there something about Lance Bass and the doctors being really like crazy? So I look him up, and guess what happened yesterday? Lance Bass was on People Magazine. He was on AOL.com. He was mainstream news yesterday. Lance Bass posts cheeky pic from colonoscopy and urges others to get them too. Lance Bass, this was from a couple of days ago. So why is this guy known for this? I don't know. I mean, this makes no sense to me. But just coincidentally, I looked him up to find the story, and there's a new story about the same thing. I mean, how many times do we need to see him on a medical bed after having undergone a very uncomfortable procedure? Well, here's 2 times. Bizarre. Let me open up phones because you can access this by using the link below. But if it's easier to call in, I can put the number up and turn the phone on. There's the link. And maybe there's one other thing to bring up here with Kate Perry. That video from Calcified Lies is making these connections between the Emerald City, the Space Needle, and how in this trailer for Final Destination, the girl who is warning everybody that there's going to be a disaster is dressed like Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. And I thought that's notable because there's a thing with Dorothy that we can connect to a few other characters, like Dolores in Westworld, who wears a similar dress. And Westworld is sort of like Oz, where the man in black is like the Wizard of Oz. And it all kind of pertains to the story of Persephone in the underworld. But interestingly enough, Kate Perry dressed up as Dorothy for this Wizard of Oz themed American Idol debut. So there was this American Idol skit where she's Dorothy. But the connection here I'm making is that she just went up to space, her little space odyssey, and then this Dorothy character is in this Space Needle in this trailer in the Emerald City. And then here we have, of course, Kate Perry in the Emerald City. May not be anything, but the timing is conspicuous because there's overlapping symbolic meaning behind the Space Needle, the One World Trade Tower, and the symbol of the obelisk in general, as it pertains to this, I guess, metaphor of the West represented as the Tower of Babel. Sort of like the Titanic. You know, the Titanic is a symbol of the West, and the Titanic has been correlated with the sinking of the Twin Towers in many ways. If you didn't know, James Cameron directed the Titanic, and in one of the scenes, the Titanic splits in 2, like Twin Towers, and they sink separate, jumpers and all. So there's some 9/11 imagery, predictive programming in 1997 in James Cameron's film, The Titanic. Again, as a metaphor for the West. But then when 9/11 happened, where was James Cameron? He was at the site of the wreckage of the Titanic, filming a documentary called Ghosts in the Abyss. So this Titanic Twin Tower thing has been connected, but I think it also correlates to the space station, which represents one world unity, all the nations, one journey from Earth to the heavens. And the Tower of Babel has been also correlated with America, and more recently, Megalopolis, Babylon or America as Rome, with the idea that it's going to fall and the tower is going to break. And what does this represent? Well, the one world language is the internet, the interconnectedness, the thing that allows us all to speak. That's going to fall, confusing the languages. So I think what we're being set up for is a destruction of the space station, maybe is part of it. I mean, I tend to think so. I mentioned the significance of the $100 bill and the series, The 100, season 1, episode 13. There's that number again, where it falls from the sky. Repeated theme. By the way, in season 1, episode 13 of The 100, not only does the space station fall, but there's a bunker where this man is collecting art from like the 20th century, well, rather before the 20th century ends and everybody's going to bunkers, he collects all the art from the world and stores it. And one of the paintings they focus on is a painting of the Tower of Babel. Like, what are the odds they're going to have a painting of the Tower of Babel in the very episode where the space station comprised of all the 13 nations falls? Not a coincidence. And one more thing, in 2019, they put something like $100 million into the Space Needle in Seattle, which is next to the Electronic Music Project, EMP. So again, $100 million in the quote Century Project. So $100 bill, Century Project. Actually, no, it was I think it was the 50. Yeah, I think it's 100 million, but it was called the Century Project. Yeah, here we go. A significant redesign to preserve the Space Needle's legacy. But my point is, this could be the money and the funding. This $100 million could be what they're using to set up the magic show when they destroy the Space Needle. They could be using this as a cover. The renovations, the building it back better could all just be a cover for setting it up for its impending downfall. And by the way, one more connection here. People have been talking about Austin Metcalf and this particular psyop, how he's wearing a 33 jersey in one of the pictures. But here's another one. What numbers do you see standing out with this particular character? If you look on his left and right, you have 9/11 and 11/3, both kind of built into it. May not mean anything, but if we're looking at a psyop, you need to look at it as though you're examining a movie for the purposes of review and deconstruction and subtext analysis, which means that nothing is accidental. A good example of this is the movie Leave the World Behind, where every scene, every prop had a deeper underlying meaning. All right, I'm going to open up phones. I just want to make sure that the phone numbers don't go up on the screen. I want to protect the privacy of our callers. So I believe Jurassic Liars said he wanted to call in. The number is 505-510-4226. I'll pin it on the screen. And I'll do my best to conceal anybody's numbers here. Okay, here we go. Okay, so if you want to call in, the number is 505-510-4226. And then you can also use the link below. So we've covered a lot of ground today, and there's still quite a lot more. I'll continue to go through my notes. Robert Cremo getting the death sentence. A lot of stuff with him, of course. We talked about him yesterday. The final tweet of Austin Metcalf. Faith that God got me, heart emoji, and my work will pay off. 2 days before the stabbing. 2 days before the stabbing, final tweet. Faith that God got me, my work will pay off, and a heart emoji stabbed in the heart. Probably a hoax. I mean, further indication of a hoax. Okay, we talked about Lance Bass. The name stuff is strange. Like Carmelo, what's his name? The stabber's name, Anthony Carmelo, same name as some basketball player who got into the Hall of Fame at the same time. And we look at these overlaps. Well, there's another Metcalf. DK Metcalf's expression on first day with Steelers goes viral. So I see these names going viral, but it's not the same story. And sometimes this overlap is intentional. For example, when Chadwick Boseman died and it was Rip King referring to the Black Panther, there was also a trending Rip King for Martin Luther King, because there was this event at the mall at the MLK monument that day. So lots of interesting overlaps. By the way, you might find this interesting. Researchers at the University of Turin analyzed the data from Internet Movie Database on 47,000 movies, and they came up with a list of the most influential films of all time. The number one most influential film of all time Wizard of Oz. So why is that? I mean, there's a lot of reasons I can kind of guess. I think largely it's because the Wizard of Oz contains the story of the other world, like Alice in Wonderland, Dorothy and Oz. This idea of mind control as well, rather accomplished by putting us into a simulation. It's kind of intrinsic into the Wizard of Oz story. All right, moving on. Let's go through my Twitter account. I had a number of things that I marked off here. If you want to follow me, it's IPS Think Tank. IPS Think Tank on Twitter. I'm also live there, and the archives do pop up there as well. Okay, let's see here. Mark Hamill. Now, Mark Hamill is Luke Skywalker. He says, just now the FBI arrested Judge Hannah Dugan out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin on charges of obstruction. We now have, this is again, FBI Director Kash Patel, which I spell with a Q. But Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker says, we have now arrived at the arresting judge's level of fascism. I pay attention and I follow a lot of these significantly Trump deranged characters, like Robert De Niro, Alec Baldwin, who's not so vocal anymore, Mark Hamill, because I think this Trump derangement syndrome is real. But these celebrities who make their whole lives about it, I think they're doing it for provocation reasons. Like they're acting. Mark Hamill in particular, with any of these characters on the world stage, it has to do with how they're represented to us in the movies. So I think there's a deeper meaning behind Mark Hamill and his opposition to Trump. Just noting here again that he's always just like De Niro. And as we saw with De Niro, many of De Niro's characters pertain to Donald Trump, helping to demonize him. And then also showing the assassination thing. That's one of the things. Like, so in Machete, De Niro's character presented a Donald Trump and an assassination attempt. And they presented him in a negative light before he was even in politics. I call these predictive programming proxies. And they are a fact of life. It's not just life being the inspiration for art. It's not art imitating life. It's actually fake events imitating the propaganda. It's psyops imitate art because it's not real life. I've been talking a lot about Laura Loomer and how suddenly she's this important character on the world stage because she's a national security risk. She's a threat, rather. So listen to this. Park Rykoff went on TV from MSNBC to say that Laura Loomer is a national security threat who should be on a security watch list. And again, she's been roundly criticized for being crazy, a loon, a conspiracy theorist. Now she's dangerous. This is consistent with her predictive programming proxy in Netflix's The Madness. He said extremist Laura Loomer, who denied 9/11. Let me fix the audio on this. The way they put these things, denied 9/11. No, I think if anything, she probably is a 9/11 truther. They don't deny it happened. They just tend to say that somebody else is responsible. So that's kind of how it works. But let me play a short clip just so you can hear this attitude towards Laura Loomer that's been very popular. And this is, like, to me, an indication of that she's being set up for something. They're preparing for something.
advising President Trump on who to fire in the military. General Hawk is gone from Cyber Command because Laura Loomer, who shouldn't be anywhere near the White House, she should be on a security watch list, and even in defense of Trump, shouldn't be near the commander-in-chief as a national security threat. She is inside the White House advising the president, and that is what the whole world can see. And I think we have a crisis of confidence in our security, in our stability, in our character, like in the moral integrity of this country. And it's so deeply lacking that our children are watching too. I mean, we all have kids.
Now, Copacetic brings something up. Can some doctor red flag her and put her on forced meds already? Okay, one of the things they brought up is that she can't own a gun. So you have this, again, this conspiracy theorist who has Trump's ear, and she's been a part of this Trump assassination narrative since 2017, when she jumped on the stage during Julius Caesar in the park, where they kill Julius Caesar, but it looks like Trump. She jumped on stage to interrupt it. So you can't say she's an outsider or some random loose cannon who's just moving these circles. No, she's in the White House with Trump. And her corresponding character in this series starts exposing this tech mogul and social media influence that he had that was used to help steal an election. And once she tries to expose this, he has her killed. And I'm bringing this up because the crazy conspiracist characterization is what they have been really highlighting here. And they've also said she's crazy. And they want the public to think conspiracy theorists need to be red flagged, marked crazy, locked up, and medicated. So it's part of her persona that they've developed here. But it gets even more interesting because recently she called out Jack Dorsey as having helped the Biden administration steal the election from Trump, or they helped Biden steal it in 2020. And that notion that Twitter was a crime scene when Musk bought it and that Musk could expose Jack Dorsey, that's similar to her corresponding character. And when she did that, the billionaire had her killed with some kind of a nerve agent. So I'm just seeing this build up and just being consistent with our analysis of staged world events corresponding with the entertainment. It would seem that Laura Loomer is being set up for her exit from the world stage. I'm imagining it might be another Seth Rich type, like it'll probably get conspiracy theorists active for a long time. It'll be a fitting exit if they do it this way, and I do think they will, because what else can they do? You know, it's not like they just character assassinate her. That's not going to be enough. They already do that. Locking her up, that would be a big win from the perspective of making the case that conspiracy theorists are crazy.
Kids, right? I mean, who can our children look to? We need an alternative narrative. And you and I have talked about this before. Leaders need to rise up, whether it's President Obama or someone outside of the political space. We need a daily alternative narrative.
Okay, this is the part I meant to get to as well. He said, we need President Obama back on the world stage to counteract Trump. And I've been talking about the 1619 versus 1776 thing, which is one of the main dialectics in play here. It's the two worldviews and represented by Trump and Obama. This is why they've had this back and forth since Trump first called him out on his birth certificate. But again, right here, he is saying we need Obama back.
Too. I mean, we all have kids, right? I mean, who can our children look to? We need an alternative narrative. And you and I have talked about this before. Leaders need to rise up, whether it's President Obama or someone outside of the political space. We need a daily alternative narrative that can show the world, hey, we're not all ridiculous and crazy. Some of us are still here and we still have integrity and we still represent America.
Very interesting. All right, let's move on. Underwater atomic bomb test by the U.S. at the Bikini Atoll in 1946. I've been looking at some of this old footage. I'm pretty sure that Christopher Nolan already has the nuking of Seattle in the can. Like, I think they've already shot it as far as what they're going to superimpose over the fireworks display that they give us. 4chan exposed as Mossad honeypot propaganda and incitement site. Yeah, obviously. Who didn't see that? All right, phones are open, 505-510-4226. I think we've covered most of what I wanted to talk about. The twin stuff is unusual. We talked about the in-sync twins, Bridget and Paula. Synchronized speech, they call it cryptophagia. Like the twins in The Shining. These twins, they speak at the same time, cryptophagia.
With our mum, and he went up there and he was.
And we're just talking about twins because twins are a reoccurring feature in many of the seemingly staged events that we've been looking at and in the movies. Not sure what it means again, but the occult coding to all these things is always intriguing. Do you remember the patch for the Gemini mission? Was it 1968? What was the year of the Gemini patch where it looked like each one corresponding to where here it is, NASA Gemini. I'll put this up on the screen. So we're just trying to figure out what is the deal with this twin stuff. And we talked about this since the, not real twins, but Suni Williams and Butch Wilhelm went to space. So look at this NASA Project Gemini patch. Very 9/11-y. Another one that you can look at that ties into this is the Hilton logo, which has this swirl on the H, looking like where the two planes hit their flight paths. And of course, there's a Space Odyssey monolith-inspired Hilton Hotel at Ground Zero. Overlooking Ground Zero, there's a massive black monolith. And it's consciously designed to be the monolith. Not a coincidence. And when we look at the Hilton logo, you won't be able to unsee it. All right, so this has been Infinite Plane Saturnday for 4/26/2025. One of the topics that we brought up lately is truther bait. And it's important that we recognize it. And from now on, anytime there's a big psyop, I'm all for just sharing whatever we find. But before we co-sign something as evidence of a hoax, we need to analyze it carefully and not get caught up. But just the fact that there is so much truther bait, red herrings, and misdirection attending every fake event is another evidence of it being fake. You don't see misleading narratives purposefully planted on real events. It's purely a facet of fakery. CJ Synchromorpheus posted this. This is kind of interesting. Just a little throwback here. This is the Corona symbol you saw all throughout Westworld Season 3. Westworld is a Jonathan Nolan thing. Same guy that brought us Fallout. So this is why it's and also, by the way, Fallout 2 had to delay its production because of the fires in Los Angeles, which were characterized as Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I mean, it's a lot of overlapping. But this whole series, Westworld Season 3, the movie poster has a skull with a space needle in it. It's all about the space needle and an EMP. And take a look at this picture. Again, this came out March 15th, 2020, basically 4 days after the pandemic was declared. Characters in malls with masks, just chock full of predictive programming. And it's a pattern. It's a pattern with these directors, the Nolans. And one of the concepts that we've introduced in the last year has been the concept of the metascriptor. So Joe Rogan's like, Heather McDonald hit her head and she was making a joke about being vaxxed and mocking God. It's just like God wrote the script. We're talking about the script, but it's certainly not God. But there certainly is a script. And you can go back through any of these popular films and you find these patterns, but you also find consistent directors connected with it. Lean Dion remarks, Westworld Season 3 had concurrent 2020 riots. But this is an example. When the Nolans, the Christopher Nolan, Jonathan Nolan, these are examples of what we call metascriptors. So it's not God, it's the metascriptors. Who are the metascriptors? Well, who writes the drills? There was this drill being conducted when the London subway bombings happened. Somebody wrote it. Who writes these mass casualty operation drills? It's like the question here people ask is, could man have orchestrated these things? Yeah. There's a director involved. They don't just direct movies, but they direct the propaganda on the world stage. And I identified directors that I think I can correlate with the exact psyops that they were involved with. Everybody knows Kubrick had something to do with Apollo 11. I think his involvement in 9/11 is far more interesting. But you can look at something like Jordan Neely being suffocated or asphyxiated by Daniel Penny, and based on the predictive programming and how it was introduced to us, I would say that Jordan Peele directed it. I think Spike Lee directed the death of George Fentanyl. I think that James Cameron directed the LA riots and the Cop City riots in Atlanta a couple of years ago. I think the Nolans had a huge part in directing the COVID psyop and will be directing the incoming Seattle psyop. And yeah, season 3 was all about the melted space needle looking thing and EMPs. Iman says, that's what I've always thought. Red herrings are evidence the official narrative is false. Yes, they throw out these misleading narratives like you can tell it's fake because there's a dummy hand. But then the dummy hand is fake evidence. So you have the right answer, but for the wrong reason. And you run with this. And now to the people who automatically believe it, you're making baseless claims. I would call the Kate Perry thing questionable, not just on its own, but in the context of all the previous examples of Blue Origin fakery. They don't suddenly just become real. There are reasons to call every one of these launches fake, and to suddenly see this one and say, well, this one looks real. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, Jeranism thinks it's real. But you knew that the previous ones looked fake, and they're getting better at it. So what are you going to do when the special effects are so good that it's indistinguishable from CGI when it looks totally real? You can't let them gradually improve their lies and like, okay, now your lies are good enough, I'll start believing your lies. No, they're still lies. They're just becoming better liars. Yvonne says, I thought Heather McDonald knocking her head after mocking Jesus and boasting about her jabs was too far neat. Yeah, exactly. It's too perfect. But then the question is, it's too perfect to be true, but then who made her do it? Did she do it? Was it an inside joke? Was she paid to do it? My best guess would be, if you're a provocateur and your job is to spread certain ideas and you got some kind of security clearance, you're an intelligence asset, maybe you would be told, throw something out there for the anti-vaxxers. Because the anti-vax movement was played. Everybody who was a part of it was psyoped. They all fell for all kinds of bad evidence. There were these things, we call them crisis shakers. There would be people on TikTok vibrating, claiming that the jab did it. We had all kinds of people claiming that metal was sticking to them because of the jab. We had so many examples of people spreading fear in order to make this psyop catalyze all the truthers. Like, this is the main issue. And for a lot of them, that became their identity for a couple of years. And they were convinced everybody was going to die. That never happened. Anti-vax is one of the biggest nothing burgers of our lifetime. And so is the pro side. And some people who are still really attached to that narrative will see me as a bad guy for not being on their side. But look, I'm anti. I'm not a needle phobe, but I think the entire whole body of people who are attached to this issue were provoked, and you were given reasons to believe stuff. Like the clotting corpses thing is so fake. All these fake embalmers going on InfoWars and stuff. I'm like, yeah, the bodies are all clotted. You wouldn't be getting clots if somebody suddenly died, because if they suddenly died, they're autopsied and you're not doing a single point injection where clotting is an issue. And I have memories of clots because that's all you're really doing. When you embalm a body, the fluid's injected into the artery, and the jugular vein is snipped a little bit so you can have forceps that go into the heart. And as you're draining the fluid, you monitor the flow. If at any point it stops flowing out, you just squeeze out the clots, because everybody has them, because your blood congeals when you die. So every corpse is clot filled. And the clots are accounted for. It's a big part of the process, because if you don't pull the clots out, then the body could swell unnaturally. You have to have perfect tissue saturation and maintain a flow. So the blood is just going down the drain. If it stops, there's a clot. And sometimes you release the clots by, simply, and this is just when you're washing the body, you run your hand down the calf, and a clot's going to just pop out. So anyway, yeah, all corpses are clotted. And again, if somebody suddenly dies, like the documentary said, suddenly died, then since it's not an expected death, they're not going to go through the normal embalming process. So again, I called that out. A lot of people wanted to believe it. They still called it the clot shot. All right, let's see here. Commenter says, yeah, Iman says, Andreas Nack, the German chemist who blew the whistle on the nanotech and the jabs, was supposedly assassinated with a direct energy weapon. Another crisis actor. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I remember when the protests started, the first time it was protested, I saw people were calling the whole thing fake. Then suddenly all these slick, big channels came out, and they weren't calling it fake. Their position was the pokey is bad. So it went from calling out the hoax as a hoax to taking sides in this anti-position. But that's standard. And so that's one of the things we have been paying attention to, is the use of, again, controlled opposition narratives and misdirection. And misdirection is how they work. This is a great point that was brought up by somebody the other day, because we've had this ongoing debate about the reason for predictive programming. And people think, they'll say, well, these are directors and artists. These writers are in touch with the zeitgeist, and so they're just channeling this information. That's really not an uncommon take. People will say, yeah, Hollywood directors are just more in touch with the simulation, that they're conduits for these messages. So they have all these different ways of mystifying it. But along with these fake events that are attended by programming in entertainment are drills. So how do you explain something like Event 201, the global pandemic exercise? It contained simulations for what was to come, including the conspiracy theorists who would be against the cure. That was all in Event 201. It was in their script. Anti-vax was scripted as much as anything else. But I don't see the people trying to ascribe synchro-mystic explanations to the entertainment. I don't see them trying to ascribe it to drills. Like 9/11 has 100 different movies and references we can point to leading up to it in very specific ways. Like the Mario Brothers movie, where they vaporize it. But what about all the drills? There were 88 some drills. There were more than 1,000 casualty actors on that day. All these drills that corresponded with the event real time were obviously the work of man, scripted by human beings. There's no way you can ascribe that to, well, the Department of Homeland Security is just tapping into the zeitgeist and sensing what's going to happen. They don't make the same argument. They don't mystify the drills like they do the movies. But the drills are as much a part of it as the movies when it comes to the programming. So I'm just saying it's another strike against the mystified explanations for glitches in the propaganda matrix. You have to figure out how the drills fit into this picture. Again, we're talking about models earlier, and those who don't recognize that media presents you with merely a model and the map is not the territory, they get lost in the map. And truthers are lost in the map. They've just taken some trails that are off of where the main streamers are, but they're still on the map, and they see inconsistencies in the map as evidence that reality is inconsistent, that reality is subjective, and that we live in a video game. I can assure you, reality objectively exists, and the purpose of conspiracy theories is to draw you deeper into the subjectivity of mass mediation. The only objectivists on this plane, on this whatever, the only objective stance is the one that takes into account that our entire backstory that we share has been mangled, bent, and warped. You can say what you will about our disagreements about cosmography, religion, the shape of the world, but one thing that we all agree upon is our backstory. What is our collective backstory, our history? We might disagree when it comes to 50 years ago, 100 years ago, but like recent history, the last 30 years, it's pretty much set in stone what the masses believe. And then you have the designated conspiracies, but both of these are wrong. But knowing that we all live against this collective backdrop of lies gives us a different model for looking at the news every day. So my model of the news, my model of the world, is that this is merely a, not just an optional, but it's the almost mandatory. It's like the state religion. This is the worldview you're supposed to have, but you can opt out of it. And I've opted out of it. And the people who haven't figured out about the entrainment between entertainment and news are still in the map. They're still confused. And I want to point out too that I'm not confused. There's this kind of a cop-out where people will say, well, I don't know, I wasn't there, or we can never know. Nothing is knowable. Everything's fake. Those are all cop-outs. That's just a way of admitting that our intellects are incapable of understanding reality. And I don't think it's a valid response. I think not only is it a cop-out, and it's somewhat lazy and uninformed, but it's the position they want you to take. They want you to think it's unknowable and that you can't arrive at some semblance of truth, or that there is no truth and everything is subjective. And no, that's just simply not how it is. And the more we examine, the more we track along as a parallel media, or basically what we're doing, I call it parallel media because we're not anti-media. That's truthers. They're all in this box. Parallel media means we're just following along with what both sides believe, noticing it, looking at the gestalt, the big picture, but maintaining a separate account, which is inclusive of fakery and lies. So we may not know what is behind the lies, but we recognize lies as such, and we simply disbelieve. We're fomenting a culture of disbelief here, non-believers. And you can get away with it. You can be a non-believer. You don't have to explain it. The people who are believers have to do all the explaining. Like, what is your real reason for believing that this kid was really stabbed? You have no video evidence. What is your reason for believing it? You saw it on TV. Is there anything that would subtract from your belief in this? What would detract from the credibility of their story? For me, Jake Lang. For me, it's the movie that just came out, Sinners, that has parallels. And it's also the fact that this event has been utilized by all of the usual suspects in the right-wing media ecosystem, and they've essentially tried to frame this as a white Trayvon Martin. Like, real murders don't get this special treatment. Real murders don't get some famous, or rather infamous, character like a January 6th insurrectionist involved in it. All right, well, thanks for the comments, everyone. Appreciate the support. Thanks, Cope and others, for handing out membership wrenches. I'm going to make it a point tonight to work on and possibly finish the Gabby Petito documentary or deep dive so I can release it for members. Violet says, what news is real? That's a good question, because I'm not saying everything is fake. I would say that all of it's real, but it's bent, like it's misinformed. Like 95% of the journalists could be honest and just reporting stuff with high journalistic standards. But the 5% of fake news steers the agenda, and they treat the fake news as though it's real. So it's describing reality. Well, it's even questionable. You could say, well, the cameras are objectively showing us stuff, but even that, You have to take into account their frame of reference, and that worldview building isn't just what they show you, but it's what they exclude and what they never acknowledge. Yeah, we have 195 people combined just on video, and on the audio streams, probably a few more, 3 or 4 dozen more. But it's safe to say mass media is a liar. Collectively, it's a liar. And you have to be your own source. You can't outsource your intel. There's no reason to. And especially today, everybody's a reporter. That's why I was giving out press passes. I mean, the press pass thing is because we are recognizing that we are our own sources, that we are unlockdownable because we're essential, just like media. But our reportage and our investigations don't provide a perfectly succinct story, beginning, middle, end, and backstory and manifestos in one day. Our stories, our reportage, it's a work in progress. We're just building up more information because we're not operating under the supposition that you can know enough to believe it. Like when the American Airlines plane hit that chopper, some people believed it right off the bat. It's like you believe headlines. It looked real, but so do video games. What's your reason for believing it? Because I would argue that automatically believing the news is believing it prematurely. Or we could just say, you only believe it, you don't know that it happened. And this is a framework. This is the model. It's an active mode of processing information. To just believe it is to be passive, to have no mental immune system, to have mind aids, to be susceptible to mind viruses. And that's where they want you. I've said this before. The government has given everybody mind aids because it wants you programmable, but they don't want to have to compete with the programs or the mind viruses of their opposition. Here I am says, the events perhaps mostly happen. However, what we're shown is not real, nor much of what we're told. Well, here's the thing. If it's real news, it's going to be reported locally. If it's fake news, it's going to become some national political debate about DEI and Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Like, you can kind of tell the difference between pure propaganda and real news. So if you're just trying to be informed about what's relative to your interests, that's completely different than the entertaining propaganda that we get with all the drama attached. You can live without that. But my overarching point tonight really has been that they use the entertainment to mirror what they're about to fake. So if they're going to fake a nuke in space that knocks down all the Starlink satellites, they're going to have to educate the public first. Before 2020, we had a number of things. Netflix even had a 5-part documentary called Pandemic. They have to educate you. So the public is now educated about EMPs, blackouts. Leave the World Behind was a big help with this. They're educated about space junk. They've seen examples of it. They saw it on TV, so they believe in space junk. They hate Elon Musk. Airplanes have had to dodge his space junk. The loose satellite from the Russians is already in the news. So the frame of reference is set. If they say a Russian satellite just crashed in the middle of New York and we're going to have blackouts and no internet for a month, we're going to say, oh, it's just like the movies. If they don't provide you that frame of reference, you're not going to accept it as readily. This is basic advertising. Propaganda, advertising are both about repetition. And there are studies that they have. I mean, they study us. Think about this too. Netflix purchased all of the DMs and the browser history of Facebook users. They know everything about you. They can target market psyops to niche demographics. And knowing what they know, and we're talking about marketing and perception management and influence operations developed to a science, it's not a stretch at all to me. that they have a sophisticated manner of getting us all on the same sheet, and it explains all of the glitches in the Matrix. Contagion movie was trending, says Lean Dion. Yeah, and there's so many examples of this. It's remarkable, and it doesn't mean every director's in the know or every actor's in the know. That's a ridiculous straw man. When you look at a movie, only the director and the lead characters know what's going to happen in the final scene. The craft services, the lighting, the crew, they're not necessarily going to be in the know about the stuff. In 2019, there was a movie out called 5 Feet Apart, and it was about these two immunocompromised patients who had to stay 6 feet apart, but they were in love. So the movie was about social distancing before we all had to go through it. How many people had to stay 6 feet apart from somebody that they loved, just like the movie? Do you remember all the horrific ideas they were giving people? Like, here's how you can do it without passing this. It was horrible. They were introducing concepts to the public. It was a very deviant time. I mean, everything about 2020 was just off and backwards and just bizarro world. And it also told me something else. Anybody who claims that the human race hasn't been conquered, that there's not an elite, that we're not totally mind controlled, missed the point. Absolutely we are. And the mind controlled outnumber the few of us who have entered into this area of deprogramming, where we're seeing through the stuff and not responding to it emotionally. Rather, we're not reacting emotionally. We're responding intellectually, but we're not. When was the last time you were triggered? When the plane hit the helicopter, I wasn't crying. I wasn't, oh, it's so bad for those people. I'm like, okay, as expected, as per the Mel Gibson film Flight Risk. Probably happened during a drill. Are there drills around? Yep, look, drills. Oh, it happened during a continuity of government drill. What are the odds that they're doing a drill for an end of the world situation when this happens? Are drills that dangerous? They were doing drills in that subway in London when a terrorist attack happened and bombs happened in the same tunnels where they were doing the drills. Who knew it was so dangerous to be a crisis actor? There were so many drills on 9/11. Look what happened. How many crisis actors were killed on 9/11? One of the big myths that we've debunked here is that they kill people in psyops. They don't. Anybody who thinks they kill people in psyops is stuck in Trutherville. Nobody dies in psyops. They'll say, why would they care? They're bad guys. That's the appeal to motive fallacy. They'll say, of course, some people died because they don't care, or they had to shut some people down, or there had to be at least one dead jumper. But when you try to nail them down, they can't get any answers to you. They'll say, well, I had this debate. I called him a 9/11 jumper truther. Because he's like, I don't believe that the Pentagon had a plane. I think they were using CGI planes. So I'm like, oh, wait a minute here. You just subtracted all the deaths here and all the deaths here. But you insist that some people died in the tower. Why? And then we start walking down this path with him, and like, how many people do you think? 5, 10? Can you name a name? And the truth was he could not. But the concept of it in the mind is this massive inferno, 50,000 people burning and burning bodies falling. They use your imagination against you. And they use your imagination to set your frame of reference. They plant things there. It's all suggestion. There's a phenomenon called the misinformation effect. And the misinformation effect describes how when you recall something, a memory, it is actually influenced by the context in which it's recalled. So you watch a movie about some big psyop that happened. Well, your recollection is being tampered with, even the emotions you associate with it. The misinformation effect actually explains the Mandela effect. It explains faulty eyewitness testimony when the interrogator bias gets the person to give answers that aren't true. Things that get people convicted because they think it's true. And it's pretty easy. It's false memories do exist. Memories can be tampered with. They're tampered with all the time. And I think that's another purpose to a lot of our programming is to, well, it's quite literally programming. Entertainment is a misnomer. That's not really what it is. Ooh, good comment here from Iman says, the judge presiding over the civil action brought against Richard D. Hall ruled his evidence that it was a hoax was inadmissible. Okay, auto hoaxing is inadmissible. Alex Jones is the most censored person in the world, right? Well, no, he's the most popular conspiracy theorist. He's acknowledged. Those calling the stuff fake aren't even admitted. It's not even contested by the mainstream because they don't even acknowledge what we're saying. Richard D. Hall is the one who was, according to the lawsuits, harassing the survivors of the Manchester bombing, kind of like Alex Jones and the Sandy Hookers. Well, Richard D. Hall was calling these crisis actors out, and he was taken to court, made an example of, and they wouldn't even take his... Same thing they did to Jim Fetzer. Like, they won't even acknowledge our claims. They won't even be heard in the court. It's amazing. It's like, wait a minute here. It's like the system is rigged or something. But one point about Richard Hall, I don't know him. He does great work, I'm sure. However, I think it's very questionable that Sidethorn journalist Alex Jones, Richard D. Hall are these prominent names associated with calling out crisis actors, which makes conspiracy theorists look like bullies who are victimizing victims again. What none of these guys do, Jones, Sidethorn journalist, or Richard Hall, that I find conspicuous is that they don't ask who wrote the scripts for the crisis actors, who directed the actors. So the crisis actors aren't smoking guns. They're red herrings. Yes, they exist, but you're not going to expose this thing with crisis actors. It's a fake smoking gun, which I see there's a lot of channels built around calling out crisis actors. A lot of them are anonymous, and they don't recognize the extent of the fakery. And so I would argue that calling out crisis actors is something of a limited hangout and a misdirection. A lot of it could even be truth or bait. As long as people are perceived as bullies for not believing these victims, they're not looking at the bigger picture. As in, again, the fact there's actors means there's got to be a script. Who wrote their script, who directed it, and how extensive. And it manages to limit the damage. That's why they call these things limited hangouts. A limited hangout is like an insurance thing where these secrets are so big, it's going to leak. So how do we control the leak? Intentionally leak something and then honeypot all the people who are paying attention and then prevent them from arriving at the correct conclusions. So it's likely too that the Sandy event was likely designed to be a focal point for years, to make conspiracy theorists look bad and to distract people from the fact that this is routine. It's not an anomaly. Again, it's the whole fake trees. If you're still looking at the same 5 or 6 fake trees that you were looking at 10 years ago, you've missed the point. If you're still mad about a fake tree from 10 years ago, and we're still walking through the forest of fakery where every tree is fake, you're still lost. And that's the big picture that I've been highlighting here consistently. And look, we get nothing but endless vindication. I'm not saying we're right about everything, but our methodology is useful. It's a testable, repeatable thing. And I would even say that we are continually accurate in forecasting, or rather pointing out trends with this particular model. We've cracked the code when it comes to concurrent and predictive programming, and it wasn't meant to be cracked. Mainstream conspiracy theorists never touch this stuff. They're just not allowed to, or they're not in the know. I listen to some of these people like Candace Owens, where I think a lot of them are just extremely insulated. And I wonder, would they be allowed to listen to Like, there's no way they could be in the know about some of these things. It's one of these things where I think it'd be better for them as limited hangout operatives to not know the full extent. It's easier to lie if you don't have the full truth. You're just basically given a story to convey. Violet says, Luigi's in the news everywhere. Maybe that's why the simulation theorists think they're in a video game. Yeah, that's something else too. The video game thing has been attached to this. Mario, Luigi, the Super Bowl had Game Over in the middle of it. Mario and Luigi, by the way, are twins, which is kind of intriguing. But the simulation theory thing is nonsense. We have something better. And the sooner we break away from bad models, the sooner we can consolidate the minds of those who are capable of getting out of the box, and we can focus on a deliberate deconstruction, on like termites on the world stage. That's what we should strive to be. Yes, Elon was Wario on SNL, says Space Chimps. And Donald Trump was the basis for King Koopa in the Super Mario Brothers movie, where Dennis Hopper was King Koopa, and the Twin Towers are called Koopa Towers, and they were incinerated. There's a lot of fascinating connections between Donald Trump and the Twin Towers. When you start looking at this concept of programming proxies, it all makes a lot more sense. Look at all the examples of characters in movies, from Biff Tannen to King Koopa to the senator in Machete. All these various movies, Charlie Crocker in the more recent one, A Man in Full. You got the character played by Ruffalo in Mickey 17. So many movies where Trump is represented in these various characters. So we have been acclimated to this character for some time. They've been brainwashing us for the present, for today's news, for years. I mean, that's one of the main points of Orwell's 1984, is really about the control of media, but also controlling history. Because by controlling the present through fake news, they control the past, and therefore are able to exert heavy control over the future, which they write for us. And they get us, I think, to co-create it with them. Not in some mystical way, but in a way of our values are being shaped for us. And that's the whole point of bringing up Edward Bernays, and interestingly, to the CEO of Netflix. Not a coincidence. Rebel Black says, Tim, they give that information specifically. Gang stalking is a thing. Scientology does it. I was stalked by Scientology. We'll talk about that probably some other time. I want to go work on my Gabby Petito documentary. So I want to say thanks to all the new members. You'll be getting a notification for members-only content. And I did a breakdown of Gabby Petito and Brian Landry and the connections between them and other psyops, and the subtext where she's presented as Virgo and is kidnapped and taken into the underworld like Persephone. It's a fascinating story, totally fake. Grimes was Princess Peach, says Space Chimps. Okay. One of Musk's many babies, mamas. You know, they say he has like 100 kids. I saw some headline today. This is one of the more interesting world stage characters as well. Like, this is where we distinguish ourselves from Trutherville. They'll say these characters don't exist. They're fake. They're CGI. No, they exist. The instant you say they don't exist, you lose people. No, they exist. But they are also acting out a role. And what does that mean by acting? Acting is just lying. When you really get down to the fundamentals of it, if you're a spy, it's the same thing. You got a fake identity, a fake backstory, and we're talking about role playing on the world stage. people who have roles that last their entire lives. And some of these characters just stand out as exemplars of this because there's just decades of programming that goes into them. The stuff with Musk has multiple levels. The way they've connected him with Tony Stark, but then the occult stuff that connects him to the space agencies, to the whole New Age stuff, it's written all over his character. Between Musk and Trump are two of the most obviously scripted characters on the world stage. But looking at other characters, we're able to determine how they are also just as fake as them. The Madness came out last year on Netflix, has a character based on Musk, character based on Don Lemon. You've got a Stu Peters, a Nick Fuentes, a Laura Loomer. Like, these are direct one-to-one characters that correlate with world stage characters in ways that cannot be explained by artists simply taking their inspiration from what's happening in reality. No, these are artists whose work is bent towards propaganda ends with some apparent foreknowledge about future events. Now, the writers, performers, the actors wouldn't necessarily have to be in the know. Like I said, nobody knows what's in the head of the director. Nobody knows because it's a closed set. We live on a closed movie set. The world stage is a big sound stage, a lot of closed movie sets. And if you're not in the Screen Actors Guild or the Government Actors Guild, if you're not in the club, you're in the dark. All right, this is Pope Elon, who is, again, this is my Pope.
We're all going to die someday. And if you're going to pick some place to die, then why not Mars? Okay. If we're born on Earth, why not die on Mars? Seems like maybe it'd be kind of exciting. But so I think given the choice of dying on Earth or dying on Mars, I'd say, yeah, sure, I'll die on Mars.
Hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Give us each our daily bread and forgive us our sins.
Hold on just a second. I got a comment I have to highlight here. Space Chimp says, I'm watching the sketch. He's talking about the Saturday Night Live. This is too good to pass up. I'm watching the sketch. Luigi tries to kill Musk in court with a red turtle shell. So Luigi trying to kill Wario. Fascinating. Predictive programming right there in Saturday Night Live. Great comment. Thank you, Space Chimps. See you all tomorrow.
Did you drive your car to Mars? Do yourself in space? Hiding behind a Tesla's name, afraid the ship will wake. Will you save us from our sins? Will you help us to begin to build a place we can call home? The Mars colony of our home. Playing a game with all the souls who don't know deception is your name. Oh, belong.
And you can tell it's real because it looks so fake.